Welcome to the Rocky Garza Show, where we explore the collision of a deeply meaningful life and a wildly impactful career. I'm your host, Rocky Garza, and with over a decade of experience as a coach, consultant, and keynote speaker to many Fortune 500 companies, I'm here to share personal stories and expert advice to help you gain clarity, build confidence, and discover that you too can build the life you actually want. Whether you're a high achiever looking for a more full life or a leader striving for professional success with purpose, this podcast was designed with you in mind. At least once a week with a client, I find that I'm having the same type of conversation again and again and again. And I don't know how else to say it other than saying I often see leaders when we get stressed, when we get overwhelmed, sometimes when we just maybe have a lack of clear direction. The only way I know to describe it is that we sometimes catastrophize what's simple, meaning we take something that may be small. We take something that may be absolutely unintentional. We take something that's totally out of context, and we catastrophize it, I think, in order to begin to hold some sort of control around what we're doing or what they're doing. Here's what I mean. I think oftentimes when we feel stressed, we feel paralyzed, we feel like we're spinning out of control or things, then inevitably what we do is we take something small and we make a huge deal out of it. I think out of an attempt to sort of gain some kind of control. Here's what I mean. Someone misses a meeting and we say, oh, that's it. They must just not respect me. It just must be because they hate me. We find that maybe our boss or our leader sends a vague email to us with just something that felt like an overview and wasn't enough detail for us to really understand. And we go, that's it. I'm probably in trouble. I'm getting fired right there. That's it. That is the end of the road. Or sometimes maybe we get one tough piece of feedback. Maybe we get a piece of feedback from someone who actually sees us and knows us and cares about us and wants to see us improve. And the immediate thing we think is, that's right. I'm not cut out for this. I knew I was a fake. I knew I was an imposter. This is never going to work. Does that ever feel that way to you? Do you ever see or find yourself sort of catastrophizing what's simple in order to potentially gain control and or unsure why, but you see that it's wreaking havoc in your leadership journey? See, I think 90+% of the time, and I don't want to give you a direct percentage because there's no statistic I can find to directly go to what it is, but I'm going to say high, right? In the 90s. I think 90+% of the time, whatever we think is going to happen doesn't happen. At least not when we allow ourselves to go all the way to the extent of the end to make a catastrophe out of something that really wasn't a catastrophe to begin with. And so what do we do with that? What do we do when we're inevitably maybe more reactive to fear than we are responding to truth? I'll say that again because I think it's something that's worthwhile for maybe you to sort of sit in just for a second. But how often do you find yourself reacting to fear rather than allowing yourself the freedom to respond to what is true? I would even encourage you to think through now, what is the last thing you can think of that potentially you found yourself catastrophizing? Is there something you can think of recently in the last couple of days that you had this thought that you were like, yeah, they know what, this is the end. It's all going to go downhill from here. The whole thing's blowing up. I'm never going to get another client as long as I have a business. The business is over. And I know that in the moment, we're not necessarily seeing the very end of it as though it's truth. But I do think over time, I've watched it whittle away at really, really great high achieving people because we allow this narrative about this response to fear again and again and again and again and again. And I believe what happens is it dilutes our opportunity to discover what is true. We obsess over something that never happens. We see it again and again and again. And I think because for us, where we inevitably give our energy, we're giving our energy to this big, potentially catastrophic thing, we're burning through all of our emotional fuel, right? We're burning through all of our emotional fuel. Maybe a good way to say it is we're burning through all of our emotional fuel, right? On imaginary fires. We've created this big thing and we feed it and we feed it and we feed it, only come to realize, wait a second, it wasn't true at all. And so how do we find ourselves back in the truth? How do we find ourselves back to a place where we can begin to maybe ask ourselves a question or two to get ourselves back to neutral, to get ourselves back to present? See, oftentimes we catastrophize the simple because we let our brains go so far out and away in time that we lose control because 6 months from now is out of your control. So thinking about what's going to happen then is out of control. In and of itself, it is literally out of control. You cannot control what happens in 6 months from now. And so I think we find ourselves sort of rolling out on this time frame, out and out and out and out. And then what begins to happen is then we fully lose sight of the present. We lose sight of the moment that we're in now because we find ourselves consistently living in the what if. But I think if we trade clarity for chaos, right? If we trade clarity for chaos, we think we're being prepared because we're trying to think of every scenario that could happen, but we've never actually created a plan for what we want to happen. Again, we are responding to fear rather than to reacting, or reacting to fear rather than to responding into truth. And so I want to just encourage some of us out there that maybe planning for every worst case scenario is more like self-sabotage than it is planning. I would encourage you to think through where in your life could that be the case? Where have maybe you have mistaken what the idea is about preparing for the worst case scenario maybe is more like self-sabotage than it is proactive planning. Because I believe often we are not planning for what we believe is going to happen. We're not planning for what we want to happen. We're not planning towards the goals that we desire. Inevitably, we're planning for worst case scenario. And I don't know about you, but I'm not attempting to live a life based on worst case scenario. And so what do we think is actually going on? Why is that the case? Why do we find so many of us are doing it again and again and again? And I think really a big part of it is because I think the drama is easier than the honesty. I think that creating sort of the churn, the turmoil is easier than looking for the smooth sails. And I know we hear that on the front end and we go, no, there's no way that can't be the case, Rocky. I wouldn't actively be pursuing something that was negative. I wouldn't actively be pursuing drama. But I think many of us, at least I know in my case, I often find that just about the time things start to work, I'm looking to change it. Just about the time something really starts to kick off, bam, your boy's looking to flip it up, flip the script. Let's try this. Let's do this. We've never done this. How do we? And I think for me, that's just a very natural response because over the course of my life, when things got good, we moved. When things got about neutral, it was time to pack it up and go someplace else. And so I lived a large portion of my life that way. And so even now, as a 42-year-old adult, I have to really push through and think about, am I trying to change it because it needs to be changed and iterated? Or am I trying to change it simply so I can maintain control of the chaos? And that would be something that I would encourage you to look at. Because just because it could go wrong doesn't mean that it will. Just because there's a possibility for it to be something other doesn't mean that it's going to. And so the next time that you feel this spiral, the next time that you feel this guttural pull to go, okay, I need to plan every possible thing that's going to happen and let my mind go all the way to the extent of what's awful. So that way, no matter what happens, I was already prepared. I want you to ask yourself, what do I actually know to be true right now? What do I actually know is true today? Now, what sort of story am I potentially adding to this, not based on facts, but based on an idea of what I hope doesn't happen? If I could allow myself to remove the idea of being afraid, how would I actually respond? And I don't mean that in some sort of like hyperbole to go like eliminate all fear and live fearlessly. And yet, no. I'm talking about being a regular human. But how much different would your day-to-day be if in the moments where you begin to feel fear or overwhelm or uncertainty, if you allowed yourself just a 10-second window to say, wait, where am I at now? What is true today? And what do I believe is really going to happen? How would I proactively respond? I think that is a great question for us to think through. And so I want to keep it short today. Keep it simple in our sort of ability to look through this lens and go, where in our life do we find ourselves catastrophizing the simple? Where do we find ourselves chasing the chaos because it feels most in control? When inevitably what we're doing is trying to gain control by pursuing what's not. I so would encourage you to think through, where are you at today? What does that look like? Where has this occurred in your life? Then where do you find the opportunity to pause, take an assessment of what is true, not allow ourselves to go to the very extent of what's terrible and awful, and then find ourselves back in a place of not just reality, but also in a proactive nature to pursue the life that we want. I so appreciate you. Thank you for joining us today on the Rocky Garza Show. And if you're thinking through this and going, I need a little bit of clarity on what this is and what this looks like, I would love for you to join me this month for my leadership training. You can go to rockygarza.com/confidence, and we would love to see you there.